Hi, Sean here from the Trusted Agent Podcast, and thank you for joining us on today's show, where each week we talk to experts both inside the industry and outside the real estate industry to gain their unique perspectives on what they believe real estate agents can do to build their credibility, efficiencies, and connections with others. A huge shout out to our sponsor, Rezo Real Estate Sales Online, who's absolutely revolutionizing how real estate agents deal with prospective buyers and vendors. Their online platform that manages the offers and acceptance process is simple, easy to use, giving time back to the agents so they can do what they do best. All right, so stick with me and let's see who today's guest on the show is. Hi, everyone. Sean here from the Trusted Agent Podcast. And today I am super excited to be joined by no other than Leanne Pilkington, who, if you're in the industry, you already know who Leanne is. But Leanne was one of the first people that I ever got to meet as a corporate leader within this industry when I joined about 6 years ago. Her passion, dedication, and I think overall energy that she just fills in others, that you can't not be in the same room, no matter how big, with Leanne without feeling that energy and that love. So please welcome Leanne to the podcast.
Well, I think that has to be the nicest introduction I've ever had. Thank you so much, Sean, and thanks for inviting me to be part of it today.
No, it's wonderful to have you, and I meant every word of it. And thank you so much for making time to visit us today in this brand new year that we have ahead of us, and full of hope and opportunity.
Absolutely. I love this time of the year. You just never know what to expect, right?
That's right. Well, I'm not even going to say it, but let's hope it's better than last couple of years. Fingers crossed. What prompted you for the podcast, Courageous Conversations, which I love, by the way, the title as well?
Thank you. It's been a few years since I started the podcast, and I'm not even entirely sure what actually motivated me to do it, because I'm a bit like that. I'll just go, oh, damn it, this sounds like a good idea, let's make it happen.
Yeah.
But I think it was more, the podcasts around at the time were more about listing and selling real estate. And for me, I was more interested in the conversations that people have with themselves that push them outside of what they already do and outside of what's comfortable for them. And so that's kind of where it was sort of in conversation. And then someone suggested to me, actually it was the gorgeous Tanja Lee down in Melbourne, suggested that Courageous Conversations would be a good name. And I thought, actually, yeah, you're right, it works.
There was a couple of books I read earlier in my career. One was Crucial Conversations.
Yeah, I've read that one too.
Yeah, isn't that great? That gave an awesome framework of how to, approach a subject with someone. But I just love the Courageous Conversations, because so many people shy away from having the conversations that need to be had, either with themselves or with the teams or with the customers.
Definitely.
So yeah, it's
yeah, we all avoid conflict, and we all avoid those. And sometimes it is the conversation that you have with yourself. I did a keynote speech a couple of times last year, and it was about is your inner voice an asshole? And and sometimes it is. Sometimes your inner voice will be telling you all the reasons why you can't do something and you can't make something happen. And I certainly went through that last year when I organised the buyout of the Lang & Simmons brand. It's like, you imposter, who the hell do you think you are at the age of 58 to be buying out a business? And, what on earth, why would you do that? You're not going to be able to do what the brand requires. And then I just went, oh, get over yourself, Leanne. You can't do it, who can? And it really, it does take that, I don't know, reflection or whatever it is. You just got to look inside yourself and just be honest, and let that negative voice just go away and leave you alone for 5 minutes and get realistic, right?
My mum used to say, whenever considering a decision that has to be made, write down the pros and cons.
Yeah.
And quite often I'd find a lot of cons writing it down. Now, I'm an optimistic, positive fella, but sometimes my cons list would just be like 8 or 9, and I'd have 2 to 3 pros. And I look at the pros and I go, well, that's good enough.
Well, there's always lots of things that can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
Lots of things that can go wrong, but you've just got to be focused on the things that can go wrong that you can control. because we can get really caught up in everything that could go wrong that we really just can't do anything about. What if the market tanks? People need to buy and sell real estate no matter what the market conditions are. And so you've just got to be confident that you've got the right people in your branch, you've got the right support services and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting. I think getting older is a good thing when it comes to that, having those conversations and caring less about what other people think and say.
Yeah, I don't know when it starts and when it stops. I know in my 20s I cared very little. In my 30s I found some good mentors, and I started caring a little bit more about what they thought, and perhaps other people that would have a say in my future, what they might think. In my 40s, early 40s, I was like, oh yeah, I really got to be careful here. And now as I'm approaching 50 myself, in a couple of years, I'm like, you know what? Time's not infinite. You got to just get out there and just give it a shot and enjoy it. Yeah.
Someone asked me after another keynote presentation, how did I get comfortable with not really caring about what other people thought? And I didn't really have a very good answer for her. And so I actually took some time to think about that. And I think it's about the fact that anything I put out there in the world, whether it's at a keynote, whether it's on social, whether it's during a podcast like this, is genuine and authentic for me. I don't say and do things just to be controversial. I wear colourful clothes because I love colourful clothes. I sometimes wear a tiara because, you know what, sometimes I feel like it. And if people want to give me a hard time for my views or for my choices, I'm okay with that because they're my choices and I'm comfortable with them. And I also, people say you should take feedback from wherever it comes. For me, if I don't value the person, I don't value the feedback. Now, that's not to say that I don't take on board any negative feedback or any constructive criticism. I absolutely do. But before I take it on board, I think about the person, because once you do put yourself out in leadership positions, as I have in recent years, there are plenty of people who want to try and tear you down. And you can get really bent out of shape trying to, as I did at the beginning, trying to make people understand your point of view and the facts of the situation, for example. You can get really bent out of shape about it, and you can waste a lot of time going down that rabbit hole, because those negative people love it when it's like, oh, gotcha, here we go.
Niggle.
Yeah. So I decided very early on in my presidency with REI not to go down those rabbit holes. And if people don't like me or my opinions, they're entitled to it, but I'm not going to give them oxygen in my world.
Yeah, I totally agree. If they're not likely to be the people that you'd want to have over for dinner or have a holiday with or ask for advice, why the hell would you take on their feedback and criticism anyway? And especially, we often find they're the ones that are not stepping up themselves and stretching themselves.
Totally.
Or they're shouting from the bleachers.
That is so true. And that was, I found myself in that position maybe 10 or 12 years ago, probably now, when I was really complaining about the education and training standards for the real estate industry. It had been eroded so much because the government was all in the name of competition, right? More real estate agents meant more competition, which meant lower fees, which is better for consumers. Whereas competition's great if it's educated, strong people, competition from people that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that was not what was happening. And so that was what motivated me to join the board of the REI, because I figured I can complain all I like, but my voice is not going to be heard. I need to get involved and make a difference. And so you're absolutely right. A lot of the criticism that I had in my 4 years as president was from people that were not prepared to put themselves out. All they wanted to do was try and tear people down with no facts, and they weren't prepared to put their hand up and actually get involved and make a difference. So yeah, I agree, it's important.
I'd love to ask, how did you you identified a problem and you saw that there was an opportunity to make a difference by being on the board?
Yep.
How difficult, or what was the path to even get on the board in the REI?
Well, for me, it wasn't actually that difficult, if I'm honest, because I already had a relatively high profile, and I'd been approached prior, and I didn't want to get involved because I wasn't really comfortable with the leadership and the direction of the board. I'm going back a really long time now.
Of course.
And so when that leadership changed, when Tim became CEO, or I was more aware of Tim's achievements as CEO, probably, I thought, and Tim actively, the one thing I really respect about Tim McGibbon is that he actively goes out and recruits people that have got something to add, people that have got big businesses, people that have got interesting views. He doesn't want yes people on the board, which is what some states have, people that the CEO thinks that they can control. Mm-hmm. So that's not what Tim did. So I didn't have a very difficult path getting onto the board. But one of the things that I did do from the time I took over as president was to do a women on boards breakfast, because at the time it was very slanted, right? It was a very male dominated board. And I just wanted to get out there and make it really transparent and easy so people knew exactly how to go about it, and what the responsibilities of being a board member actually were.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you built your profile, and you said it wasn't an easy step for you, but let's not forget, it was 12 years from the time you entered the real estate industry to becoming president. So there was a lot of work in around. Is that about right? 95?
So it was, I became president. I think I'd been on the board for 8 or 9 years prior to becoming president.
Yeah.
And I honestly think, and again, I didn't put my hand up for that. They actually asked me if I would consider it. And, I, at the time, again, just went, me? Why would you want me? I can't do all those things. God, look at some of the blokes that have been doing that job. I can't do that. And then I just thought, you know what? If not you, then who? Because there were none of the other women that were on the board at the time were in a position to be able to do it. I was lucky enough to have the level of support that I had with the incredible Jackie Jones in my corporate team, to be able to spend the time, because it's a pretty big time commitment. And so again, I just thought, you know what, get over yourself, Leanne, have a crack.
How great's Jackie?
Yeah, she's amazing.
I recently got to reconnect with her through an lead agent.
Yeah, she told me. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just so nice seeing her friendly face. We both agreed it was like seeing an old friend and that we hadn't seen in years.
A long time, yeah.
Bad on both of us on that part, but it was great to reconnect.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask, first of all, I love the color. In fact, I got as close as I could to the Lang & Simmons colors in my flower arrangement today for this interview.
Yeah, I've got my little Gus the Plus up the back there.
Nice, good. I actually want to challenge you on something, what you said just before, which was not caring a lot about what people think. In fact, I remember when I first met you and you took me through the offices of Lang & Simmons and showed me around, and I got to meet Jax and Rod at the time and got to hear where you were wanting to take the business, the franchises and the brand. And I actually felt quite the opposite. I thought you cared so much about what people thought, or the industry thought, not about you per se.
Yeah, but that's an interesting observation. So I care about, so if one of my business owners, for example, gave me feedback that they thought I was doing a terrible job as CEO, I would care about that. Yeah. Because I'm passionate about what I do, and I think I do a good job, and I work hard to do a good job. But it's more about, what I don't care about is, I don't agonize over what I'm going to wear or what I'm going to say. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not worried about what people think about all of that. And it's hilarious. There'll be, because I'm so known for colour, if I wore a white dress to a harbour cruise a couple of years ago, and this woman who I did not know came up to me, and mind you, it was a beautiful dress, came up to me and said, oh, that's so boring. And that's like, excuse me, I don't understand why people feel that they can it's appropriate to make those comments. But anyway, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's if anything, it's a real testament to the consistency of your brand.
Yeah.
People are whispering, going, "Hey, someone should check on Leanne. Is everything okay?"
She's wearing black today. What is going on?
So something's going on there.
Yeah. I'd never thought about the whole concept of a personal brand up until a few years ago, to be honest. But it's certainly something that, I do remain consistent with my personal brand, with the sparkles and the colour. Yeah, absolutely. It's getting worse and worse, actually. Somebody said to me, Leanne, your fashion sense is becoming more eccentric the older you get. And it's like, yeah, I kind of like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, if anything, that's a perfect time to go with it.
Totally. Absolutely.
I wanted to ask, when I did meet you for the first time in the subsequent years that followed, and you got to hear you speak and see how you operate your business and how you engage with others, there's something that came across. I'm just trying to find the words. It wasn't just confidence, and it wasn't just certainty in backing yourself, because you have this wonderful balance of care and empathy for others who are genuinely giving it a go.
Yeah.
But you're never shied away from having the conversation that needs to be had. And sometimes, with strong determination, and sometimes with sensitivity, and I think you read that situation very well. Sure. How did you come up with that, I guess, the courage to approach conversations like that? Because as we just said before, people tend to avoid conflict. Yeah. But how do you view it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and thank you. I'd take that as a really lovely compliment. I think,
it is.
So I think in earlier years, I was very good at showing a face that I didn't actually have in relation to confidence, in speaking up, in saying what needed to be said. I just felt the fear and did it anyway. And the reality is, the more frequently you do anything, the more comfortable you become with it. And I don't know, sometimes the words just come out. If that's what I think, you are never going to die wondering what I think. And so, sometimes I can't help myself. And I'll tell you a story. When I went back to uni in my 40s to get my MBA, because I'd gone straight into real estate, straight out of school. And whilst I studied at night, I never had that university experience, and I wanted to do it. So I went back to do the MBA, and I was sitting in the back row, because that's just what I do, right? Sit up the back with the naughty kids. And the teacher was trying to get us into groups to present, and she was faffing around. And it went on for 5 minutes or so, and then I just couldn't help myself. I didn't give it any conscious thought. I just got up, I walked straight down the middle, I took the pen out of her hand, and I said, okay, you and you're presenting this topic on this day. And I went through the whole class, and then I gave her back the pen and went, there you go. And then I went back and sat down, and I sat down and thought, oh gosh, Leanne, what are you doing? But it's just like, stop wasting my time, just get it done. Do you know what I mean? So Sometimes the words come out without me really meaning them to.
So you've always had this drive of an activator, let's get shit done now.
I am a get shit done person. Yeah, absolutely.
So not one to have meetings for the sake of having meetings. It's just get on with it.
Absolutely hate that. And it's different, I guess, now in the days of Zoom, and we're still working from home as a corporate team. So sometimes our Zoom meetings, there is a little bit of chatter and, how was the weekend and all of those things, because you've got to have that socialization. But when it comes to board meetings or principals meetings or any of those things, there needs to be an agenda, there needs to be outcomes, there needs to be responsibilities. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm surprised to hear about the imposter syndrome. I guess it's a human nature, and we all have it. But how do you overcome that?
It's not as big a deal now as it used to be, but even still, as recently as putting together the business, as you probably know, we've now got 15 shareholders at Lang & Simmons, and it was really it was me making the decision that nobody would be a shareholder without me having equity, without me actually putting everything on the line as well. And I understood that. but I didn't know if I wanted to do it. And I just, so that was probably the most recent imposter syndrome, but I've had it my whole life. If I go back as far as I was a recruiter, had a very short stint. I was selling real estate. I didn't want to do that anymore. I became a recruiter, was there for about a month, and the person who was managing the branch resigned, and they said to me, "We'd like you to consider being the manager." And it's like, are you people for real? I've been here for 5 minutes. I've got no idea how to run this business. I don't even know how to do the job yet. And so I just said no. And as a result, I ended up working for a woman who just was all over the shop, right? There is no way I would not have done a better job at managing that. And that, yes, that sort of made me realize that I need to be able to shut that voice down. So for me, the voice comes and I listen to it, and then I have to and I do actively have a conversation with myself out loud and say, okay, come on, Leanne, get over yourself. Are you for real? Like, so these are the conversations I literally have out loud. And, I talk my way through it, a bit like your pros and cons list. I don't.
Do you do that at home or in a public forum?
Oh, no, I don't do it in public.
I almost pictured you at the offices, Lang & Simmons standing in the middle, just come on.
Oh, yeah, look, if I didn't think anybody was listening, probably. Sometimes when I'm at home, I'll have a conversation with myself, and my husband will be like, do I need to get involved in this conversation, or is this one for you? It's like, no, it's all good. It's just me.
Give me a cue when you want me to come in on that. And I'll bow
exactly.
Yeah. So about 7 or coming up to 8 years ago, you started the Real Women in Real Estate. What was behind that? Do I have the dates right, first of all? And
2015, October 2015.
Okay.
So coming up for 7 years.
7 years. Right.
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. I actively avoided all things women. For most of my career. For most of my career, I have been in male-dominated environments, with the exception of recruitment. That was 250 women, and that was a whole new experience, let me tell you. But I actively avoided all of the women conferences and the women events because A, I didn't think I needed them, and B, I felt like I needed to fit in, and to fit in was not to put myself out there as a woman. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right. So you felt like to join something, you had to alter who you were so that you'd be accepted by them?
Well, yeah, I had to become one of the boys in a lot of cases. And right. Anyone who knows me knows that, I do like to party and I do like to have a drink, and I, occasionally, if you call shots, I'll be the first one at the bar. And so I think all of that sort of was fitting in and being one of the boys.
Right.
It wasn't a conscious decision, but now upon reflection, I think that's what I was doing. And so over the years, obviously, I've got some great contacts around the country. I know a lot of amazing people actually around the world these days, which seems weird, but it's true. And some women that were working for me kept on saying, oh, we need to do a women's group. We need to do this. We need to do this. And I'm like, no, what would we do there? What would be the point? Why would I do that? And anyway, they kept on me for 2 years. And I said, okay, all right, I will put out an invite. So I sent an email out to about a dozen women who I knew had groups of women in their teams. And we were holding an event. I said, do you think this is a good idea? They all said, yeah, let's do it. And so 2 weeks later, we had an event in Sydney with 65 people. 2 weeks notice, 65 people. And I stood there at that event. Yeah. I just remember standing back at that event at the tank stream in the city and thought, I still don't know what we're doing here or why we're here, but there's obviously a need for it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we did a lot of events, and it got crazy. I was literally flying around the country, doing events around the country, which obviously couldn't last forever, sadly. And I must admit, during COVID, we did a few Zooms during COVID, but we haven't done any events for a while, and it's one of those things. I would love to start the events again live, but I'm just thinking, with all things COVID still out of control as we sit here today, it's probably something that I'll hopefully be able to do later this year, but certainly not in the first few months like I planned.
Yeah, and there is a certain energy, despite the intent, that gets lost in the Zoom conference.
Oh, massively.
Versus in the room. And I think for a lot of people who are joining together in a cause, they almost need to feel that camaraderie of standing shoulder to shoulder with others.
Yeah.
To really.
That is, to go back to your initial question, I sort of got pushed into starting the group. But what I realised is there's just not enough female leadership out there. And not everybody aspires to be a business owner or a CEO, and that's okay. But what they can aspire to is listening to other people's stories. And so, again, like the Courageous Conversations, which really came off the back of the Women in Real Estate events, there's stories about about the challenges, about the difficult times. And there's been an incredible willingness for women who are quite high profile and well known to tell their own personal stories in those intimate events, because we don't have more than 100 people at the events usually. And the stories that have come out at those events, people haven't heard before because people haven't been prepared to share them. And it's really made a difference. And for me, I didn't realise that I needed a community. I didn't realise I didn't have a community. And I didn't realise that I needed one. But there's a group of the core real women in real estate who we've got our own little chat group and we communicate all the time. And, they are some of the women that when I have a crisis of confidence that I go, hey, love, what do you reckon about this? And they're like, yeah, go for it, girlfriend. And it's like, you know what? If she thinks I can do it, I can bloody well do it.
That's awesome. That is so good.
It is.
So when people are choosing to share stories that they wouldn't normally do, it's an environment because of they feel like there's the common goal, common belief, common cause, and a safe environment to be able to do
it's
so.
The most important thing. It's safe. It's a beautiful. They're just they're always beautiful events. And it was really interesting when I first did one first time I did one in Adelaide. People were a little bit reticent to come. And actually Perth was a little bit the same. They're like, why are you doing this? I'm like, I don't know, because I can. There was, I expanded into different states when there was people saying to me, come. And people are like, yeah, but why? Is Leanne Simmons coming to South Australia? It's like, no, it's not the plan. But why are you doing this? What's in this for you? I'd like, I don't know. I just get to meet some really cool chicks and have a really good time. And yeah, that's what's in it for me. I love the feeling that we get in those rooms. And once people realise there's no hidden agenda, it's not a brand building exercise for the Leanne Simmons brand. They sort of, I don't know, the magic happens. Sean, what can I tell you?
Look, I think it's wonderful to have the conversation that needs to be had, to have, feel the cause that hadn't been addressed for any time ever.
For a while. For a while.
So no, I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I get that as a society and in this industry at times that people can be a little bit, suspicious of alternate agendas. But when it's something like this, you have to be authentic. You can't have a hidden agenda. Otherwise, it takes away everything from the pureness of what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
And this is way too important of a topic to taint that. So hats off to you. Wonderful.
Thanks.
Love it. When we talk about becoming a trusted agent, and in your experience and over your time in the industry, we've talked about some of the things that I believe that makes you, a wonderful CEO and business operator and a leader within the business. But I'm really keen and interested to hear what you feel are some of the similarities or commonalities that you feel is really important with those agents that have a fantastic reputation, that are able to form a connection with others, that have credibility in abundance. Yeah. And what are those key foundations that you believe that agents should be working towards to build that trusted brand for themselves?
Yeah, I don't think it's that complicated. I think you need to do what you say you're going to do in the time frame that you say you're going to do it. That's how you build trust. If people can trust you to do what you say when you say you're going to do it. I think that certainly something that I saw throughout COVID and my work with REI through COVID was clear, consistent communication. Even when you don't have anything to share, pick up the phone and say, listen, John, I know, I'd love to be giving you better news right now, but nothing's going on. And this is, just be consistent and clear with your communication, and communicate in the way that the people want to be communicated with, not in the way that you want to communicate with. Some people, they don't want a phone call from their agent every day. They would prefer an SMS or an email. Make sure, just understand, set the expectations at the beginning and then fulfill them. I think people really want to know the real you. So I think you need to be authentic. I don't think you need to share everything that's going on in your life, but a little bit of what makes you you, I think, is really important. And be mindful of what you're putting out there on your socials. I know that there are some super successful agents that have their Porsche or their Maserati or their Rolex or their Gucci handbags or whatever it is online. I don't think, in fact, can I be honest, it pisses me off. It really does. And good luck to them for their success. I'm not taking, these people are massively successful and I get that. I just don't think it does anything for the industry at all. And, certainly I've got expensive jewelry and I drive a European car and I've got a collection of handbags. But they're not things that I think should be shared on social in that focused kind of, here's my new car kind of way. Like, I don't know.
Flashy.
I think you've got to work out who are you talking to? Like, what's the message that you're trying to send? Is it success? There's nothing wrong with that, but is that the best way to?
Is that how you measure success?
And measure success, yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do you measure success? Is it, the kid with the biggest toys wins, the most expensive toys wins, the best house? I don't know.
I was talking to one agent who is very much in that line, and disclosed that it wasn't necessarily who they are, although they felt like they have to be that way to appeal to the people that they're pitching to, and because they're that way. So it's very going micro niching. And the question came up, is that authentic?
Yeah. And maybe, maybe there is, there must be people that appeals to, I guess. And it's certainly horses for courses, as they say. I went out and saw, I've got some very successful business operators out in the western suburbs, and one of them bought a Porsche. And the next time I went out to see him, he was driving a Camry, and I'm like, what happened to the Porsche? He said, Porsche doesn't work out here. It's in the garage. Yeah. I'm like, fair call.
Alienates?
Yeah, fair call. So I just think, people want to know the authentic you, and I think you've got to be clear about the messages that you're putting out there on social and why you're putting them out there as well.
Yeah.
And I think in certainly some areas are more of a community than others. And so there are certainly areas where people respond very well for you being involved in the local community, whether it's the football or the schools or whatever it is. But it's not enough to throw money at that. You've got to genuinely be involved in those things, right?
Our first podcast released with John Cunningham, we in that episode, he
does that so well.
Oh, thanks. We spoke about that in great detail and how he's built, his brand off community involvement for decades, and it's not an overnight success, and you have to be, that's where authenticity really kicks in. It's about consistency of that message as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we can change as people throughout the years and decades of our lives, but something that doesn't really change is our values and what we truly stand for and what our purpose is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, that whole values conversation. If I go back, 10 or 15 years, I used to think, values and mission and vision and blah, 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 right? And so I never really got that into it. And it's only been in more recent years. So for example, I made a really bad hiring decision earlier last year. And when I reflect, and I have to say I rectified it within 3 weeks, right? So it didn't take me long to work out that it was a bad decision. But when I reflected on it, I wasn't clear enough on communicating our values. I thought I knew them, and my team and I are very shared in our values, but I hadn't communicated them well enough or really understood that this other person just didn't share some of the, one of our values is we get stuff done and we get it done fast. Yeah. Now that's not for everybody, right? Some people like to procrastinate and to really map things out and think it through. And sometimes there's absolutely a place for that, but there's other stuff that just let's get it done.
Yeah.
So I now run sessions in conjunction with Harriet, who's our head of growth and development at Lang & Simmons, on helping our business owners and their teams find the values, because it's a big mistake for a business owner to go, okay, our values are X, Y, and Z. If you've got an existing team, you need to work those values out together, because people are not going to buy into the values that you
dictate down, or they sit on a poster and talk about once a quarter, if
exactly that. Yeah. And they're great things they are great things to use for hiring, and also if you need to do performance reviews, because performance reviews are one of those things that people hate to do, right? But if you can talk about your values, and so let's have a look, Sean, how that really met our value of getting things done quickly. It does make it a little bit of an easier conversation, if you like.
The tangible elements of values. And I think that's somewhere people forget is, it's not just about coming up with the buzzwords that, a little bit connect with the team. And at Reza, we recently did the exercise of getting our team together and coming up with them as well. Yeah. And very proud of that, and happy with where we've ended up. The challenge for us is, how do we make it tangible? So what are some of the behaviors that sit above the line, and what are some of the behaviors that sit below the line, so that we can talk about it in any given moment, whether it be a meeting or performance results. Are we meeting the values or not? And I think it is an excellent call out to have it linked into performance reviews and not just breezed over, because usually it underpins everything.
Yeah, massively. And that above and below the line conversation is one that we've been having. We had one office that was really having some genuinely difficult cultural issues. And what it turned out was every conversation was below the line. So there was blame and excuses for everything. It was nobody, and so having that very clear conversation around what is below the line, how do we bring it up above the line, and to encourage people to call each other out, saying, okay, yep, Sean, I hear you. However, how can we bring this conversation above the line and talk about what we can actually do, what we can be responsible for, what we are going to achieve? So
another courageous conversation.
Another courageous conversation. Absolutely. There's plenty of them.
You're a pretty positive person and full of energy in life, and this high ambition, driver sense to get things done, and expressiveness that supports it. When you find that you're working with someone or a team that blames and excuses, does it personally drain you, or do you not let it get to that point? You just kind of...
It annoys the shit out of me.
Me too.
It's a really good question, right? Because I am incredibly optimistic, and upbeat most of the time and energetic and all of that sort of stuff. But, there's times for all of us where things are not going well, where you're challenged personally, maybe, whatever it is. And it can be really hard to have that face, right? But yeah, when you're dealing with people that just won't take any responsibility, it's for me, it depends on who they are, how I deal with it. Most of my business owners at Lang & Simmons I know really well, and I've known a lot of them for decades.
Yeah.
And so I can be a little bit cheekier and a little bit more brutal.
Blunt force trauma. Yep.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. But when you're dealing with somebody who you don't know so well, then obviously it is a different conversation. So, but yeah, I try really hard not to let other people's moods and problems impact me too directly, and I do try and practice. I'm not one to practice gratitude every day, but if I'm not feeling great, or if I'm a little bit down in the dumps, I do something to cheer me up, whether it put on a sequined jacket that most people would only wear to a black tie function, put on my tiara, think about the things that I am grateful for. I just try and consciously get myself out of that, or potentially have a dance party. My husband and I were very big on the dance parties during lockdown.
We have Friday night discos in our house. Our two daughters, 3 and 9. That's not their names, that's their ages. And then we every Friday night we have Friday night disco.
I love it. Yeah, we did it Wednesday nights for us. It was Wednesday night dance parties for us, and yeah, so much fun. It
is kind of shake things off. There's I did a little stint last year. I can't remember if it's COVID 1 or COVID 2 actually, but the gratitude journal, the meditation, the yoga, and some of it stuck, some of it didn't, and some of it I go back to, and some of it I won't ever get. But
yoga?
Yeah, well, no, you know what? Funny enough, Yoga with Adrienne on YouTube.
I did yoga with Adrienne first.
She was great,
yeah,
but she said one thing is do what makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that stuck with me. So sometimes I'll do yoga with Adrienne, or sometimes I'll go for a swim or the rower, or sometimes I'll get a haircut, because those things actually make me feel good 12 minutes later, or a half hour later, or an hour later. Whereas sitting in your funk is just, you got to break yourself out of it.
Absolutely. And I think it is super important to realize what works for you. I certainly found a lot of people said to me, how did you manage to do, your Lang & Simmons job and the REI job? And it's like, well, I worked 7 days a week. It's like, no, but how did you really do it? It's like, I really worked 7 days a week. I genuinely did. But during the second lockdown, I realized that I had to start. So on a weekend, I was still working, but I would make sure I took a lunch break, because I don't normally take a lunch break during the week. On the weekend, I would have a lunch break, and I would sit and I would eat a sandwich and I would read a book for an hour. I love to read.
Fiction or nonfiction?
It depends. I've always got a whole lot of stuff going on at the same time, but that in particular, just what I would call airport or beach reads, just schmaltzy rubbish, or not. Like, I have a very wide range of books, but I just needed to make sure I had that break outside, out on the back deck or out in the sun, because I just wasn't getting out of the house enough. So it's important to know what energizes you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciated that. That was so lovely to reconnect with you, and one-on-one too. That's such a rare time. I know at events it's so rare to even get a couple of moments of your one-on-one time. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been lots of fun.
All right. Well, have a great year. I wish you all the success that you're going after. Please say hi to Jax for us.
I will. Absolutely, I will.
And hopefully we'll get into the office when you return into the office, and we can see how it's all going on your end soon.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Thanks again.
All the best. Bye, Leanne.
See you later. Bye.